Hi everyone, I'm Ruchika Bindra and welcome to #NoFilter. We are talking about the teenage brain and how it actually affects how we relate to our environment. Hi everyone, I'm Ruchika Bindra. Welcome to this week's episode of #NoFilter. With me today is Julia Johnson. She is a registered psychotherapist and she also has her MA in psychology. Welcome to our show. We're really excited to have you and to see how you can kind of unveil the teenage brain for us and simplify it. Our fabulous teen panelists that always help make our show so insightful. We have Viren, we have Mark. I always smile when I look at Mark because he always thinks I'm going to say his name wrong, but I don't. And Olivia. Hi, guys. Hi. Okay, so this show is about, all our shows are about teens, but this one's about the brain, the complex brain that you have. So, Julia, can you simplify it for me? Why do they say that the most complex part of the human development occurs during the teenage years? What is this whole rumor?
Well, let's talk about when you are a baby. People say that your brain has a lot of plasticity. Mm-hmm. Now, there is another period and it is when you are an adolescent, when your brain has the same plasticity. So you hear that babies between 0 and 5 years old, they take everything and they learn everything.
They absorb.
They absorb everything. The same thing happens with the adolescents between ages like 12 to mid-20.
Okay.
So it doesn't stop when you are 18. It doesn't stop in your 20 or 21. It goes until you are in your mid-20s. And now lately, like adolescence starts earlier. It's starting like even before 12 and extends longer, like up to 25. So this is a time when your brains actually are developing, and you're not gonna have this chance again to learn and to develop in life. Like it's gonna end when you reach adulthood. So this is a very important
That's why I believe teens are smarter than us, because they absorb more. Once you hit adulthood,
this is the time when they are developing basically the frontal lobe, which is here, and the frontal lobe controls self-control and reasoning and thinking.
So the most important aspects are what are basically being developed during this time.
During this time, yeah. What happened is that the amygdala, which is behind the frontal lobe, develops faster. Okay. And the amygdala is what controls the impulsivity and what controls, anger.
So could we say, like, when teens sort of, parents say they're so rebellious or they're acting out or they don't have self-control, can we actually scientifically say that there's a connection because there's a development going on?
There is a development going on. And there is a lot of activity in your brain at that time. And basically what happens is that in the brain, there is a path developing between the frontal lobe and the amygdala.
And they're trying to build that
path. Mm-hmm. And the communication, because then there will be like, imagine like, I don't know, this is the frontal lobe and this is like the amygdala, all the cells here and building this path. And you can see it like on the, when they do MRI, they can show MRI you scans. how it builds. And what happens is what they call pruning, because those cells start, sometimes they even get rid of neurons and they start reshaping and they start actually building like a path, like a very, that connects the frontal lobe here, like here, and the amygdala. So what happened, the second stage is when those cells are covered by something called myelin, and that myelin is what facilitates the communication between the frontal lobe and the amygdala. But in between that, there are many things that happen. Right?
So in terms of making it easy for the teens, what could we say that means? Does that mean that, they're going through different hormones that are like, is it a hormonal thing that's affecting it? How do your brains connect? Like, how can we attribute their reaction to certain things based on their development in their mind? Like, where's the connect?
Okay, so what happened is because you are more prone to amygdala is more developed.
Okay.
And the brain has more plasticity because it's developing the frontal cortex. What happened is that amygdala is more impulsivity, more aggression, fear. So what happened is that at that time, this part of the brain that is more planning and decision making is not totally developed. So what happened is that team at that time, they look more at rewards.
Right. What are
and
they getting from it?
situations that are more exciting. Daniel Segal described that stage like, he described it as essence. Essence means emotional spark, because there is a lot of emotions
Right,
going
they're
on.
fluctuating during
They
this phase.
fluctuate a lot. So they have a lot of passion for life. That's the downside, the good side. But the downside is the irritability, the fears, the intensity of the emotions that are not that good. Then he talks about ES is emotional spark. The SE is social engagement. At that time, they want to, peer is very important.
Right.
So
for
at that time, rewards and peers and belonging to
A sense of belonging to your
to a
community, to
community
your-
is very
Right.
important.
So guys, do you ever feel that, like what Julia's saying, during now that you guys have gone through sort of the stages of being a teen, and you guys are still teens, but do you ever look back and go, oh my God, I was so like aggressive, or I don't know why I was so like rebellious for something, like what was going on with me?
Yeah, like even going back on, say, like a Facebook chat from 2 or 3 years ago when I was in grade 9, I'm like, what was I saying? Like, am I stupid? Just stuff
What
like
was
that.
I thinking?
Yeah, like, am I like?
It's okay, now we can
Stuff like
blame,
that.
blame it on our frontal lobe and our back lobe.
Exactly.
Now when your parents say something, you can be like, listen, Mom and Dad, there's a scientific reason for why I'm acting out, okay? And there's nothing wrong with me. Your upbringing is fine. It's just my brain is developing according to the scientific stages.
Exactly.
What about for you guys? Do you guys ever kind of look at your development and see like, oh my God, what was I thinking? What was I saying?
Yeah, I guess like when you're a younger kid, like when you're more exposed to different kinds of situations. So like if you play sports, then you're more aggressive there. Or if you, I guess, do something more related to dancing and things that take emotion to really get into it. I guess that has sort of an effect on how you look at things and how you treat people, how you talk to people, how you deal with these kind of situations, because you have that kind of that emotional kind of
connect that holds into it, right?
Right, exactly.
And on that note, we are going to be back on the other side of the break. We're going to talk about what does the law and the judicial system have to do with our teen brain. Hi everyone, welcome back to #NoFilter. We are talking about the teen brain and the development stages and what it actually means to our environment, our society, and what it actually means to shaping who we are. So Julia, I have a question for you. A lot of cases that happen in the legal system, whether it's, cases that are involving crime that could be more, through robberies, through violence, through murders, through lives being taken, off late a lot is as well with sexual assault. A lot of the judges always attribute the fact that is the teen mature enough to kind of go ahead with this? Is the teen mature enough to kind of go ahead with trial? Is the teen even fully aware of the actions of what they did? And they always sometimes, reference that in their verdict, and they say the teen wasn't fully developed or the maturity wasn't there. So how can we say that we're using kind of this science and mixing it with law? Where are we standing with that?
They're doing a lot of research about that, about adolescents who offend, who are doing offenses or criminal acts, and also the teen development brain and how that is affecting them. According to what we discussed before, they can't take decisions like we do, right? Because they're more impulsive. The part of them that is able to plan, to think ahead, to think about consequences is not really fully developed. So we can think about the future, we can think about consequences, but they don't have the same ability that we do. And knowing that there is a lot of research done in plasticity, because they started studying like youth who offend and that are in the system, that are being in an institution. They study whether that is good for them, because at that time their brain like needs needs the stimulation. At that time their brain, they are exposed to new things. At that time is when they're getting ready to be independent, to leave home. So the brain is working, so they're ready for that. And at that time, that part of development make them look for novelty, excitement. That's why I put them at risk, right? Because they cannot see the danger the same way we can see it. So saying that, they are studying the kids that are in an institution, and they see that being in the institution doesn't help them. And many times they go out and then reoffend again, and then become more impulsive. Now they also realize that when teen or youth have been exposed to trauma, even before birth, or they have been exposed to alcohol or drug abuse, then their ability to develop the reasoning and the planning abilities and decision making is even less. So at that time, they need to be exposed. And they found out also that the kids that are institutionalized and the kids that are in the community, they have offenses, but when the resources of the community are used, there is no difference between the ones, that has been institutionalized.
Right.
The rate of reoffense is the same. So basically what they're trying to do is to say, okay, this is the most important stage of their life.
Right.
Because they are not going to have the plasticity of the brain again. So at this time, they need to have a stimulation. They need to have new things so they can develop that brain, right? This is a time when they are very creative, and when they have the passion to go into things that they really like, and to develop and explore, right? They like novelty, they like to explore, and when they are institutionalized, they don't get exposed
that
to
creativity in space.
Yeah, they don't get to be exposed to school or anything like that. So when they come out of the system, they have no interest for the school, and they still don't develop, the self-control.
That
because
they should develop.
They should develop, because this is all about self-regulation. So that is helping to look at the policies, to look at the way, the kids are being treated in the residential, and also whether it's right to just keep them there for life, or even giving them like life sentences. Not life sentences, but, death sentences.
Right, a long-term
or,
bars.
yeah.
Okay.
So how is that going to help?
Guys, for you, all three of you, when you guys look, in the news recently, we have the Stanford rape case, or we have so many teens that commit suicide. The number one, actually, suicide rate is amongst teens still today, internationally, actually. Do you guys sort of get, it's sort of a twofold question. Do you get this idea that, okay, teens are not fully developed, so do you guys have that sense of sympathy when you hear about cases that are, the teen offender was not aware, or he says, he didn't realize the consequence, or he did an impulsive action? Do you sort of feel like there is a valid reason behind it? Do you feel like we need to be doing a little bit more research? Because, Julia, something just came to me. You said that now the gap of what it is to be a teen is getting bigger, right? So we're starting younger, and it's getting a little bit older. So it's almost becoming such a wide age gap pool that it's like, when can we kind of, sort of nip it down and say, okay, this is it? Can we use that? Are people using it to their advantage in the legal system as well? So it kind of, I think, draws a great point to look at.
Personally, I don't really buy the fact that somebody is completely unaware of what's going on around them, and therefore they shouldn't be held accountable for their actions. I mean, like, even as early as, even before your teen years, you kind of have a sense of what's right and what's wrong, like a really simple sense of, I can't do this, or I shouldn't be doing this. So I don't really buy these big cases in terms of, oh, I'm still developing, I don't know what's going on.
But I think it's not about that they don't know what they're doing. I think what it's about is the fact that today they're saying that there's so much research that we need to do and understanding that the brain is changing. So how are we going to make sure they don't repeat offend? A lot of the cases now are going at, okay, instead of taking the 16-year-old, that's committed this crime and putting him behind bars or putting him behind detention, let's use his mind, let's use his creativity, let's get him into sort of a space where either, let's say, I don't know, if he was drinking and he killed somebody, let's get him to learn the issues with alcohol abuse, let's get him to talk to other teens about it. So they're trying to find ways where they don't want to, as a member of society, this teen that's eventually going to come out in 20 years in society, he's not going to have any sense of development of his surroundings because he was isolated. So the way they're kind of using it is by saying, okay, let's put them in these, environmental places. Let's put them out with other people. So do you guys kind of think it's sort of a better approach, or do you, I know that you're more sort of somebody who's like, no, you know what you're doing.
I don't really buy that.
Right.
I feel like if somebody's gonna offend, then they're gonna be prone to reoffending again. So I don't know how likely you are to want somebody to be around other people when they've done something wrong. I don't know.
That is a true point. I sort of do agree with Mark because, like you said, I agree with Mark in the sense that it's not safe for them to be around other people, but I feel like what you're saying is...
But you're slowly integrated. It's not like the next day
The premise,
you're put in there's a
and
program.
the idea behind it is it makes sense, but I don't know how realistic it is.
Right.
Okay,
But
you don't know if it's going to make a difference to their actual...
But the idea of, I guess, researching of how these things influence teenagers, how the development actually occurs, it actually is important, and it is important to discuss and to find a
All
conclusion
right, on
this.
the other side of the break, we're going to talk about what things you can do to strengthen your brain, how you can improve, and how you can actually stop blaming your hormones for acting crazy. Hi, everyone. We are talking with Julia about the teen brain, the medical system, how it works, and what it actually means in our daily lives. Julia, you spoke about something really important. You said peer pressure. That's something a lot of teens are constantly battling with. And it's funny, people say that teens battle with that, but I feel like adults as well, whether you're in the workplace or, you're integrated into a new family once you're married, you're always sort of, in some sort of way, you're always in a pressure to fit in. I think it's just the nature of the world we live in, but obviously it's heightened for teens, which kind of, I guess, correlates to the fact that one of the number one suicide rates are amongst teens, right? What is the link with that? Why do teens sort of feel that that is the fastest solution? Like, mental health is such an issue that we need to, I think, draw more of an attention on. And I know it's such a big topic, but what can you kind of build the link with?
With suicide teen, one of the things is the peer pressure. Research has found that when somebody killed themselves in the area, there are more suicides among teens. So it's like sometimes it becomes like a fashion and a mode, or
Easy escapism because
easy
one person does
but
it.
also is the fact also that if we talk about brain development and not thinking about consequences and thinking that it's just today and not thinking about tomorrow, that can also be something that will...
And I think more and more schools, I know a lot of universities and colleges have that, but I think like when I was going to high school a few years ago, mental health wasn't something that was discussed. We didn't have a counselor, or we didn't have a mental health area. You always have like a health room, you have like a first aid. You know how first aid is so like every single room would have it, but we never had a mental health thing. So if somebody was suffering things of, depression, or they were going to anxiety, or they needed an escapism or a route, they didn't know how to channel it besides things like, suicide, because it wasn't discussed. And I think now that we know, as you said, with more research that the teen brain is developing, I think mental health should start at a younger age so that they have an outlet, right? Because otherwise it becomes, like you said, it's a ripple effect. If you see somebody doing it in your community, you kind of think that's a great escapism in that moment.
Yeah, there are programs that goes to the schools and talk to the youth about mental health and what is help, and there is always like counselors talk about it. They talk in the school. There is always like a week where they discuss about mental health, issues, so teens are able to know that there is help out there. There is one thing. We talk about the developing brain, and we talk about strengthening that developing brain, and one of the things is problem solving.
Right.
So we need to start conversations with teens about, problems, about what they're facing,
How do you
about how
solve
they feel, right? So they kind of start thinking about ways to solve it,
Solution.
about, hope, about, this is not the end. So that way they start building those paths that they need. But it start with conversations, it start with problem solving,
And
with
should
thinking.
Should it be something sort of that the parents or the sort of, I guess you could say, your elders come to you to get you to open up, or should it be something that, a teen will more likely want to come and talk about it? Because I find teens often are very closed. They're in a phase of their life where they get very closed off to share their emotions. They don't want to come off as emotional, and I think they like to hold it back. So how can we link that? How can we get them to start talking more about issues?
I think adults, we have to be more present to them, like parents, more present to your kids, to what they are feeling, to what they are going through. And when you are there, when you're talking about things and they feel comfortable, they start trusting.
They open up.
They open up.
Right,
Because
so you need to build
like
that
if you never talk about it, then they think that's something that they shouldn't talk about, right? But if you are more open and you also, as a parent of an adult or mentor, talk about your feelings and talk about, how life could be difficult sometimes, then
How to
cope, they will be more open and they will start seeing that possibility. Again, they are creative, very creative. So they start seeing possibilities and connecting dots.
Guys, how do you feel about the suicide issue?
I feel like a lot of teens, like there are a select few teens that are very open with, their elders or with their parents, that they are able to talk about this kind of thing, about if they're getting bullied at school or any other social issues that are happening with them. But I guess with the teens, like you said, that are closed off, I guess I don't know if it's, like you said, something that's still developing in the brain, that they're just scared to open up, or they just don't know how to say it. And the parents, when they're trying to talk to their kids, they don't really know where to start, right? So that's really my question to you, is just how do they start the conversation, even though they might or may not have an idea of what's going on?
I am a parent, and I think about that. Like sometimes I look at my kids, they're teenagers, and I think, how should I address this in a way that I'm not judgmental, that I'm not critical, that I'm not reprimanding? And sometimes I just use their same, language. Like, hey guys, what happened? What are you doing?
I wish my mom did that growing up.
Something like that, and then one time I was talking about relationships, and then I said, well, what is dating about, and then they start talking, about their relationship and how they felt, and I was shocked seeing
Because they
that.
had that trust with you.
Yeah, they were
in this
able, but I realizing, oh my God, they really have a sense of what a relationship is and what is important. And I wasn't able to see that. I was worried, like a mom, what's gonna happen here and there. But no, they knew, and they started talking, and that opened a conversation. So I think sometimes we have to, I start thinking about when I was a teen.
What are the ways you can open up the
Yeah, and how I
conversation?
felt at that time and in that situation. And then that helped me to just go and not being critical or judgmental, like, I am the adult, I know you should do this way or that way. So I think sometimes we need to go there.
From this segment, what I understand is basically the teenage brain is developing, right? And it's going through so many waves of feelings and emotions and growth. I think communication is so vital. And as you said, communication without feeling judged, whether it's, in school, whether it's fitting in, whether it's through your actions that you do. I think we need to have more studies about the brain, about the teenage brain. I think it's just something that's come really big into science now. And I think we really need to draw more of a light to it, because it's such a complex issue, right? To understand where they're coming from, why they're coming from the way they are. And we can work on parent and peer relationships as well. So on today's episode, we spoke a little bit about mental health. We spoke about the teen brain, the development stages. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, you can go on Julia's website as well. It's going to be on our Rogers TV No Filter homepage. And we will see you next week.